folks, and welcome to another Gamespot Now Playing. We're looking at Grid 2 today. I'm joined by associate producer on the game, Toby Evan Jones. Thanks for joining me, Toby.
No problem at all, sir. So we've got 4 different types of events to show you. We've got a couple of race events, we've got a drift event to show you, and an altogether different type of racing, which is an elimination-based event.
Cool. All right, so what have we got up first?
So first of all, we've got the EMAR race series, based on the Red Bull Ring in Austria.
Sure.
So this is a motorsport circuit with real heritage. It used to play host to Formula 1 events back in the day. So yes, it's definitely got heritage there. The type of car we'll be seeing is super touring cars on this track, so very much about lots of downforce, loads of grip, high-speed racing. So the 2 cars that you have to choose from in this build is the Volvo S60 and the Gomez Competition Scirocco.
So is this sort of the top level, the top tier of car that we can kind of hope to reach in Grid 2?
No, there'll be sort of a lot beyond this. You know, this well, it depends on your preference. You know, I mean, this is obviously sort of for people that like grip driving and sort of lots of downforce and all the rest. This could be, you know, the pinnacle. But there's a lot of different type of racing in game as well. So drift, which is an altogether different type of racing, all about sort of losing the back end and breaking traction. Whereas this is obviously about maintaining that traction, picking the lines through the corners for the top speeds. As you can see there, it can be quite tricky working your way through the pack as well with that many cars on track.
Yeah, a couple of bumps there. So if you do decide that your racing style is like whack yourself right into the middle of it and bump aside all of the other cars, that damage is going to do more than just take off some paint.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you can choose between the 2 types of damage. I mean, you can choose to have visual only damage if that's your preference. Obviously that way you'll get the deformation and sort of the breakup of the bodywork, breaking up depending on the type of bodywork. You know, carbon fibre bodywork will break up in a different way to the regular metal bodywork. Sure. Or if you want the full experience, you know, you go for the full damage. That'll realistically model sort of the deformation of the suspension components. You'll feel the steering pull as you start to damage the front of your car. Yeah. You'll get tyre blowouts and all of that in there as well.
So we're on the Red Bull track here, and the track itself, that's designed as like for like as you can get.
Yes, definitely. So this is one of our licensed circuits in the game.
Sure.
So the amount of detail that the guys go to when recreating these circuits is immense. I mean, they'll be out there photographing every foot of the track. Anything that protrudes more than a few millimetres from the track surface, you know, they'll be measuring and sort of recording. And yeah, as I say, it's immense the amount of detail they go to. Real credit to the level design guys on that. Do
you ever get to go out to the tracks yourself and take a blast around them and learn how the cars seem to feel on them?
Personally speaking, unfortunately not. Unfortunately, we don't have that privilege in production. But yeah, we try to get the handling guys as much time as possible behind the vehicle, as many of the different types of vehicle that we have in the game. Sure. So previously they've been on drift events, so been down to rallycross events, race circuits in the UK.
So I guess you've been, in developing that kind of feel and response to the car, you guys have gone for this time you've gone for sort of like a midway point between super realism, like full-on realism, and that arcadey feel that I suppose a lot of people might be kind of used to, and you're calling it true feel.
Yes, yeah. So the true feel system, sort of as we've called it, is a new approach that we're taking for Grid 2. Yeah. It was sort of born at the very start of the game, where we made quite a bold decision, which is that we didn't want to include any assists in the game. So artificial assists such as braking assists, steering assists are things that the team have done really good work with in the past. But ultimately for Grid 2, because we've got such a wide variety of cars in here and the team is so passionate about the picking and choosing the cars that we have in the game, we really want the player to understand how the different cars handle, the difference between oversteer, understeer, front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, balanced car versus a drift car, and we really want them to learn how to drive those cars, you know, in real life, counter steer and weight shift. We feel that assists ultimately get in the way of that, so we made the decision not to have any. On the flip side, obviously, it means that can be really quite hardcore. So that's where the true feel handling system came in. We had to sort of look at a way of accurately recreating the cars, but just sort of smoothing off the edges, just so that it's a little bit more accessible for people that perhaps aren't truly hardcore.
So you're not just going to run it straight off the side of the track?
Well, hopefully not.
So
perhaps a few times, but yeah. You'll soon learn and adjust.
So are all those lessons, do you have to learn them just through your own means in the races, or are you going to be sort of brought down a kind of a tutorial line of teaching you how to understand that without the driving assists?
Sure, yeah. I mean, from the start of the game, there'll be some tutorials in there just to get your head around the handling, modelling Grid 2 and the controls and all the rest. But there'll be a natural learning curve within the game as well. I mean, towards the start, you'll be sort of in some of the safer rear-wheel drive cars and safer front-wheel drive cars. As you progress, you'll be stepping up through the tiers. Obviously, more power, some more leery handling characteristics, perhaps more weight towards the back of the car, so they'll be more twitchy and eager to go.
Yeah.
Good work. So we'll now be moving on to the next event that we have for you, which I believe is the Nixon Drift Series. So the two cars that we have to choose from here are the Honda S2000 and I believe the second car, is the Boss Mustang. There we go, the 5th generation Mustang. Both obviously high-powered rear-wheel drive cars, fairly essential for drift events.
So where's this track again?
So this is Okutama Mountain, so it's one of our point-to-point mountain tracks, so there's a lot of undulation and sort of gradient changes through the track, which adds an extra challenge obviously in a drift event.
There's a lot of smoke coming off that tyre.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Craig's quite well versed in this S2000 now. I think he's done a fair few laps in the past with it.
So I'm assuming tyre blowouts you can kind of write off in this particular race style? Or
well, I mean, it's a very good point actually. I imagine if you had a rear-wheel tyre blowout, it could help you, in fact, in getting the back end around.
That was a very quick 6.4 miles.
Yeah, it was. My distance may have been slightly off there. There we go. So on to the next round of the event.
Okay, so how many rounds do we have in this?
Sort of depend on the event. I think Craig's actually gone for a restart there, but events can take place over multiple rounds, and your score will accumulate across those.
So I'm assuming you guys don't take to the streets of Leamington in your lunch breaks to sort of make sure all of this is looking too accurate.
Well, we've got a fair few enthusiasts in the studio, shall we say? But yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, the people here enjoy their cars.
Yeah. Are you a rear-wheel drive car man
actually.
yourself?
Yeah, I've been definitely rear-wheel drive for a fair while now. So
which is your car of choice?
It's all research, of course.
Oh yeah,
it's essential for the. Yeah.
So we're going to see your car in here?
Well, personally, not my own personal car at the moment. I've got a sort of rear-wheel drive grip car at the moment. So,
yeah.
Not one of the ones in the game.
So we're going for a bonnet view this time. How does that work out on drifting? I feel like you're probably not looking at the road for most of the time.
Yeah, well, it's totally personal preference. I mean, a lot of the guys in the studio actually enjoy drift events in bonnet view. You get that sensation of the car travelling sideways a lot more than you do actually in chase cam, which can be really quite exciting.
There's some really nice bonnet reflections going on there as well, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the graphics tech's something that, again, evolves sort of with the Ego engine sort of across all the titles that we produce. So every improvement that we make in any game rolls onto the next title, essentially.
So using the Ego engine for games like F1 and for Dirt and everything, does it make it easier to find that sort of the sweet spot that makes Grid 2 sort of have that unique feel that you guys are going for?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd say that in terms of the handling and the rest of on that side of things, Grid 2 is very unique from the games that we've produced in the past. But what's enabled us to do that is all the improvements that we've made through the previous titles. The Dirt series with off-road loose surface stuff is very much about suspension components. So we've sort of really progressed the tech there. Whereas F1's been about sort of aerodynamic tech and the contact patch between the tyre and the road surface, modelling those tyre physics. So all of those changes obviously roll in. We're able to benefit from all of those for Grid 2, and it means that it gives us a really solid platform to then progress and build what obviously the true film handling system on top of that.
Sure. Okay, so looks like the next one is one of the new live route modes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So live route is a new piece of tech that we've developed for Grid 2. It was actually born out of the city, a lot of the city environments where there are a lot of sort of crossroads and junctions. The guys modelled masses of track for those city environments, and we found ourselves obviously having to choose the routes that we're picking through the cities. It started off as a bit of an experiment. We thought we've got so much reference here and we've built so much of the city already. Why are we restricting ourselves to the junctions that we're building? It could be quite interesting to develop some tech that dynamically changes those junctions as you approach them, almost in a random style. So we did the first experiments with the sort of just on a base level making the junctions change dynamically. Found that it was really quite immersive and fun, just having not really knowing what the next corner was going to be. So you can't really learn the track. You're always being sort of taken by surprise as they're changing those junctions.
Okay, so one thing I want to know is, like, you've got the full size of the city. Does that mean that you've got an accurate sort of like-for-like representation of the city like you have on the tracks, or have you been a bit more inventive on this one?
Yeah, so I mean the city environments, as we discussed, I mean with the circuit locations, the guys travel out to the cities, get mountains of reference. They photograph every type of surface, every texture, sort of any gratings or manhole covers, sort of the curb types, all of the rest, and then they come back and build the tracks. Obviously with city locations we have a bit more freedom than we have with the licensed circuits, so you'll find that perhaps where there are open sections of the city that don't actually have roads going through, we may sort of build a section of track cutting through those open sections just to sort of create the circuit loops. So we have a bit of freedom there, but ultimately, I mean, anyone that's been to these cities will recognise the landmarks that are there and recognise many of the streets.
Sure. So where the track can deviate on these live routes, is it a simple case of left or right, or is it a bit more than just two choices expanding out? No,
there's much more. I mean, it totally depends on the type of junction, to be honest. I mean, if it's a crossroads, you'll have sort of 3 potential routes open to you there when you approach. Sometimes it may just be 1 or 2. Sometimes it'll be much more on say a roundabout or something like that.
So the single player itself is in Grid 2 is going to be following a bit more of a sort of a storyline and a narrative.
Sure. Yeah.
What can you tell me about that?
Yes, I mean we've totally separated out these single player and multiplayer experiences with Grid 2. So the single player experience is very much going to have an underlying narrative there. You have this investor character, Patrick Callahan, who's got this vision for a new type of race series essentially. He wants to create this new world series of racing, encompassing all of the different race types that you have out there, and with the ultimate game of sort of identifying the best driver across all of those types of racing. So that's essentially what drives the single player career and narrative.
Sure, and then the multiplayer is simply you developing your own character.
Yes, definitely. So we've actually sectioned off content for multiplayer as well. So there'll be certain cars that you can only get in the multiplayer section of the game. So people that really want to sort of plough the hours in there, they get their own progression mechanics in terms of unlocking and purchasing vehicles, modifying the vehicles that you own to add sort of your own personality to them. So it's very much its own journey.
So when you've already announced the IndyCar Pack DLC that's going to be coming for Grid 2 later on.
Yep.
Is that going to take on the narrative further on the single player, or is that going to be locked off and finished off as is? Sure.
I mean, yeah, that won't obviously be core to the single player narrative, because a number of players won't have that DLC pack. But what it will do is for sort of people that are very interested in that kind of racing with the IndyCar, because it's very much grip sort of aero type of racing, so they'll be able to get the Indianapolis Oval with the IndyCar, including pace car liveries for the Corvette Z06 and the Camaro, so they could actually recreate essentially an Indy 500 event if they wanted to.
Okay, so we're using the Mazda RX-7 this time, and the track should be opening up a different route for us on this live route.
Yeah. So this is using the live route system. So as Craig races, it'll be actually changing junctions dynamically ahead of him. So the route that he drove previously could be completely different this time around.
Sure.
So it adds an extra element of challenge. You can't really learn the track.
Now, if Craig crashes out at any point in this, because I've seen he's not a totally honest racer here. He does do a little bit of bumper car style, which I think is fair of every racer or every driver I've ever seen playing Grid. If he fully smacks out or spins out, is the flashback system from Grid 1 still in here and available in this race?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the flashback was sort of brought to the market by the original Grid, as you know, so it would be wrong of us to exclude it from Grid 2. Especially as it's been sort of copied since by so many games.
Sure.
As you can see here, Craig's actually entered a flashback, so he can rewind along.
Remove the bumper there.
Yeah, he can pick the point at which he wants to resume and jump straight back into the action there.
So that bar there is obviously showing how far you can go back in the game. That looked like quite a long time. Is that flexible depending on difficulty level?
Yeah, I mean, essentially with difficulty, the thing that will change is the number of flashbacks that you can do. So on the easier difficulties, you have more flashbacks available. You can see in the bottom left of the screen there's a small flashback icon with 4 flashbacks remaining. If you're playing on harder difficulty, you potentially have only 1 flashback in the event, or none at all.
Is the length of the flashback fixed then, depending on?
It's usually around up to around 15 seconds or so, but
okay.
we find that it's scalable. One of the areas that we've managed to develop in the tech is that to eke a bit more flashback time, depending on what's actually going on tracks, the amount of data that's being tracked and recorded. If it's a massive amount, obviously will be restricted. If there's less data being recorded with the other cars and all the rest, we can extend that out a little bit more.
So in games like this, where I'm sure a lot of racers won't just want to use the pad, they want to sort of get on and use racing wheels, and I know you guys even have a full-on D-box here.
Yeah.
Is it difficult and an extensive thing to be able to sort of code in a system like a racing wheel or a full-on D-box like yours, which I'm sure a very small percentage of your of your user base can afford? I mean, does it even, is that a big task for you guys to do?
Well, surprisingly not, actually, which is a testament to the work that the physics guys have done in the game, because a system like the D-Box, obviously it recreates the G-forces that are acting on the car through the actuators on the seat. You may think that there's a lot of work involved in implementing that, but in reality, what we found is when the first time we sort of plugged it in, essentially the game just dumps all of the physics data out to some middleware software, which then translates that into the forces on the seat.
Sure.
And we found straight away that all of the forces that we were getting through the seat were very realistic. So all of the forces and G-forces acting on the car are pretty much spot on.
Okay, so this is the last track of this preview build. Where are we for this one?
So this is Paris. So this is a nighttime event in Paris.
Yep.
Very much sort of top tier cars here as well. So some of the fastest road going cars you'll find out there. Obviously Craig's in a Bugatti Veyron Super Sport. Some of the other cars that you'll see in track include the Audi R8 GT3 car, the Pagani Huayra, and the Koenigsegg Agera R.
Yeah, that is a full-on mishmash of very expensive cars, and there are bits of bonnet coming off already.
Definitely, yeah.
Nothing I wouldn't expect of Craig's driving from what I've seen so far. So I noticed just before the race began there that the acceleration was causing the car to give that sort of really powerful, torquey jolt to the right as it's revving up. Do you include things like torque steer, like the really high-end kind of functionality that you'd expect out of cars with this much power?
Yes, I mean the core thing that the team care about when developing the handling for these cars is portraying exactly how they handle in real life to the player, so they can understand how these cars drive, how they handle, what the unique traits are as well of each individual car, what truly defines the character of that car. So all of that's been captured, and you'll be able to sort of experience that in the game. You
guys never got to go out and take one of these Bugattis round yourselves?
Unfortunately not, no. The Veyron's one of the cars that the guys haven't had first hand in, but for these vehicles we work very closely with real world racing drivers and motorsports testers that have many man hours behind the wheels of these cars, and they race them in game and point us in the right direction. If it handles as they'd expect, they gave it the big thumbs up. If there are any sort of slight character traits that we may have missed, they'll point those out, make sure that we work those into the handling model.
So I noticed we've gone back to the bonnet view here. Oh, we've just switched back again. It's the bonnet view obviously is the real racing feel, but I noticed that we haven't got the in-car driver view. Is that
Sure.
is that something that you guys have chosen to remove on purpose, or was it user feedback?
Yeah, actually, it was a decision that was made very early in the game's development. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we benefit sort of through the generations of games that we produce. With the Ego engine evolves and improves. Where we are at the moment in terms of console generation, being at the very tail end of the current console generation, means that we've eked every ounce of performance out of the current consoles. You know, we're getting the very best that we can from them. Yet we knew that for Grid 2 we wanted to step forwards in terms of graphical quality, have longer point-to-point tracks than we've had previously, and to make those improvements, you know, to push those areas on, we had to claw back somewhere, something had to give.
Yeah.
So we looked at what we could potentially scale back in order to gain the processing power and the extra memory required for the sort of track streaming that we've implemented and the increases in graphical fidelity. And just looking at the sheer numbers, the number of players that use cockpit cameras, their main view sort of repetitively was sitting at around 5%. I mean, many players jump in and use it once or twice to have a look, but not many players actually use it as their main driving camera. So from that point of view, it seemed like a logical choice, obviously, to look at removing that in order to push the rest of the game on, you know, so much further.
Sure. So the feedback that you get off gamers through, well, I guess all of your series, so like Formula One and Dirt and all the games using the Ego engine, I mean, has that shaped the development of games since, well, I guess Grid 1?
Yeah, I mean, definitely user feedback, something that's really important to us. You know, we've got a community team here that are always sort of chatting to the guys, sort of maintaining the forums. They're very good at gathering any feedback from the community and passing that directly back to the studio. So we're obviously able to take all of that on board and feed it into the titles.
So all of these tracks that we've been seeing and all the point-to-point races, they're you know, they're all tarmac based. Is that something that we can expect throughout the whole game? Like Drift, for example, you know, is that going to be tarmac only?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Grid 2 obviously is very much about the on-track experience, not only on motorsport circuits but in city locations, sort of point-to-point tracks on coastlines, all the rest. It's not about sort of loose surface racing. You know, it's not about rally tracks. It's very much about sort of flat tarmac surfaces, although you'll see obviously a lot of different surface types in the game. Obviously Craig's on cobbles here, and through the various locations, you know, the track surfaces will be accurately reproduced from what you'd find in those cities. Sure.
And are these city locations especially, I mean, Paris is looking fantastic in this night setting with the fireworks going off on the Eiffel Tower. Is this going to be a locked system? Is it, or can you drive Paris in the day, or is it going to be an exclusively Paris at night race?
No, there'll be different times of day in different environments. You'll find that the environments will change depending on your progression through the career as well. Whereas early in the track, you'll find yourself sort of in club level events, which may be in city centres, but wouldn't have anywhere near this level of branding around the environment, fireworks, you know, the big crowds that just wouldn't be there. There'd be much smaller crowds, no real environment branding. Sort of late in the evening, you know, the local clubs will work with the authorities to close the road down, but it won't be a huge spectacle. From that all the way through to obviously massive events on the licensed circuits, heavily branded, through to, you know, end of the game sort of WSR events such as this, where there's obviously massive sponsorship and fireworks and everything going on.
So do you guys follow you know, various racing series yourself during the development of this? I'm assuming, you know, new cars are being announced all the time. Is there a point where you've got to say, okay, we cannot include this car. We are done building and designing new cars?
Yeah, definitely. Although we're quite lucky because we've got a really good relationship with many of the manufacturers. Obviously we need to, given the sort of generations of racing games that we've produced. So they're quite comfortable with giving us sort of data in advance sort of the upcoming cars they're developing. So they sort of trust that we keep that confidential. They work very closely with us, obviously, on the handling models of the cars and the damage as well, to make sure that everything's as accurate as possible.
I'm sure they're not very happy about sort of giving you examples of how their cars damage effectively. No. This is what happens when you run a brand new car into the side of a wall.
Definitely. Sometimes these things just happen though, you know, and
yeah.
When they do, we benefit. We get the reference. So.
It's just that much more realistic.
Yeah.
So on an elimination track like this, I'm assuming because we're running against the clock here and trying to stay ahead of the countdown timer, that this has to be exclusively track based. It can't be point to point.
That's right, yeah. I mean, essentially these events, depending on your performance, can go on for quite a long time or can be over very quickly. Obviously, if you find yourself at the back of the pack at the start of the race, when the first countdown timer drops, you could be eliminated straight away, if you've crashed out on the first bend. Sort of on the flip side, if you're working your way up through the pack throughout the race and ultimately manage to claw yourself to the front of the pack, obviously the event's going to last that little bit longer. So it's important to have the circuit-based environment to sort of keep the event going.
Is it possible to do races like this with a mix of car types and styles, or is it exclusively locked to sort of like super touring cars or like open wheel cars?
No, you'll definitely be able to put cars up against each other sort of that are around the same tier, so around the same performance. So something that we're doing with Grid 2 is we're not restricting the player to a certain type of car. So you will be able to put a sort of lightweight, grippy car up against a massively powerful rear-wheel drive car. Two cars which realistically would be able to give each other a run for their money. And you can put them up against each other and see how they perform.
So I think this is the final push for first place. If Craig can pull it off.
There. Trying to claw past. Unlucky Craig.
Okay, and I guess that concludes all 4 modes we've got in this preview build. Thank you very much for joining me, Toby.
No, my pleasure, absolutely.
And thank you, Craig, for driving. That was fantastic. I was a little disappointed with second place, but your bullish tactics on the track were fantastic, I thought. For everything else you want to know all about Grid 2, just head over to Gamespot.com.